afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I know the day is getting a little long, so what we're going to talk about this afternoon is how we can continue to build on what you've been doing for years, which is helping keep your student healthy. I usually begin this with talking about a very old quote: "When health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot manifest, strength cannot fight, wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied." So obviously I think, and most of my team thinks, that health and the well-being of your student is critical for their success, not only here but for the rest of their life. I want to just briefly mention that the acute care clinic here on campus is very different than what you have in high school. So it's a full-service clinic, operates somewhere between an urgent care and a primary care clinic. About 70% of our students say that by the time they graduate, we are identified as their primary care provider. So there's physicians, nurse practitioners, psychiatry, physical therapists, dietitian, massage, nurse, and RNs. It's located at lower level Brady Residence Hall, so really easy to get to for many students since so many live on the North Campus. We do use insurance to pay for that, so you don't have a health fee on your account. It's just processed through regular insurance. And we do have contracts with all the major players in the metropolitan area, but check with your own insurance company. So these are just a few of the services that are provided there: acute and chronic care, mental health, procedures such as suturing, IV therapy, allergy shots, etc. So it's really very full service. And most of us in that clinic have children your student's age, and we treat those young adults the way we would want our own children treated. So we begin this by talking about how do we know what we know, and how does that formulate what we do. And so we use an assessment tool and outcomes based on Healthy Campus or Healthy People 2020, which is from the National Institute of Health. So looking at the health of our nation and where do we target our efforts. We then kind of boil that down to the Healthy Campus 2020, which is a national organization from the American College Health Association doing the same sort of thing, but bringing it more down to an 18 to 24-year-old group. Because as you can imagine, the leading health indicators would be very different for this population than that of, say, the age of 60, 70, or 80. So once we do that survey, which we do every couple years, we then look to see what are the things that we should be focusing on. And these are the 8 that we've come up with, and we're going to just talk about a couple of them today. But alcohol prevention, nutrition and physical activity, physical and mental health, sleep, sexual health, stress, tobacco and other drugs, violence and safety efforts. But we're just going to talk about alcohol, stress, and sleep today, and many of those weave into almost everything that impacts a student's health. At first, we're going to talk a little bit about alcohol. It's an area that not only our university, but every university across the country focuses a lot of time and attention on, because the outcomes or the adverse events from using alcohol can be pretty significant. But one of the positive things that we know about the behaviors of our students, it's improving greatly over the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years. So our students, our young adults, are making much better decisions around alcohol than they ever used to. So at least about 25% don't drink at all, which is what we want, especially if they're under age 21. We always start everything with saying, if you're not 21, it is illegal to drink. And that there's a majority of students that either choose not to drink at all or do so in great moderation. This question is asked on the survey within the last 2 weeks, about high-risk drinking, which is 5 or more drinks in a sitting. And 39% said none. So you have a majority there that are choosing not to drink at all. And it's those folks that are going in the upper areas that are the riskier students, the students that are going to have adverse outcomes and have their academic success jeopardized. So we spend some energy on that. We always preface this that our expectation is that you will not drink unless you're 21, and if you do choose to drink, regardless of the age, that you do so in a safe and wise manner. So we talk about protective mechanisms, such as making sure that you stay with somebody, make sure that you watch your drink if you do go out, make sure that you drink water, make sure that you eat something. So because our main focus is on keeping your students safe, we want to make sure that they know this. And so we want to have them identify some of those factors if they are choosing to drink. How do they do that in a healthy manner? Some of the other things that are quite different over the years, use a designated driver. That number just keeps on going up. Our students are very wise when it comes to that. If they do choose to drink, or if somebody else within that group is, they have somebody who's driving who is sober. And that they know about eating beforehand. So we do a lot in our first year education programming. Starting today, they'll get a little bit of that. There's also things in the move-in weekend and some weeks after that as well. But it's not just that area, or that topic doesn't belong to health, wellness, and counseling. It belongs to the whole university, and we all pay attention to a student's behavior. If they sense that there's something going on, alcohol related, our public safety is very involved. The Dean of Students is very involved. We talk to the students about, alcohol does interfere with your ability to be successful here. If you drink, and drink in a fair amount, you're not going to do well here or really in any place. If first-time offenders, those students that are found to have consumed alcohol, will get a 3-hour alcohol responsibility course that they have to pay for. It takes 3 hours, and we know that they've gained some knowledge from this. That's what we're here for. We're an educational institution. It's also that everyone is entitled to make mistakes. The idea is that you learn from that and you make different decisions afterwards. So that's a piece. And we also know that those that have offended, having an alcohol violation, tend to not re-offend, that they tend to learn a lot from this experience and it never happens to them again. So as a parent or guardian, what are the sort of things that you can do to help your student in the next years to come? One of the big things is checking out the assumptions about what's the environment like. Because what they're going to remember is that student who came in late at night, maybe was intoxicated. That's what's going to stick in their memory. And so they may generalize that to say, well, everybody is doing it. But you now know the facts. 1/4 of our students choose not to drink at all. Another 39%, at least not within the couple weeks, so they tend to not drink much at all. So that reminding them, because we also ask them about perceptions, and they're like 80 points apart. The perception is that everybody's doing it. The reality is, no, not that very many are. So clarifying that with them is really important. Another easy thing is for them to take, it's called eChug or eCheckup to go. And we dump our own data in there and saying, what do you think? What is this? What's the perception? So we put what the reality is in there. We also know that certain things will resonate with students, such as money. Wow, how many drinks did you have last night? You had this many. Over the course of a year, that would cost, thousands of dollars. Or how many hamburgers did you drink last night? So a couple beers, what does that equate to cheeseburgers? For some people, calories will impact them more. So it tries to use different approaches to help the information stick. Talk a little bit about stress. Your student is experiencing stress all day today, and they will have times of stress that are greater and lesser. So we spend a lot of time as well through the Wellness Center. It's more on a prevention area. So talking about de-stressing. How do you do that? We have the project for mindfulness and meditation, which I'll look at next. And that we are a leader in the country in this area. Some of our faculty now begin their classes by saying, I'm Dr. McDermott. This is Theology 101. I want you all to take a moment, turn off your cell phones, and focus on what we're going to be doing today. So just take a moment to quiet the mind, to begin to focus. They do that in the operating rooms now. If a surgeon is about to begin to operate, they take a pause, and they learn that from the airline industry. It's like, we got to quiet our minds and focus on what we want to do. We also have, and you can see from our statistics, we're way ahead of the nation on people who have already engaged in it, and that it's made a difference. Our podcast, we now have, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 podcasts, and they're provided by many of our faculty, and they're from all departments. One is an organizational leadership professor, theology, music, psychology, law, and these are folks that also then use it in their coursework or in their classroom. One faculty member also ends her class by, let's take a moment to identify a gratitude. So what are you grateful for today? So lots of things to help students decrease their stress. Another piece that I like to talk about regarding stress is that about grief and loss. Most of us know about grief and loss mainly through death and experiences. So, and Kubler-Ross, all the research that's been done in that. What there's not as much research on is what's the loss that students experience when they go to college, especially those that move away from home and live on campus. Think about what's different. They don't have their support person, their sisters, their brothers, their grandparents, their dog, their car, their bed, their food, their friends. So much. In fact, everything really changes to some degree. But there are some things that don't change, and that's where, when about that 6 weeks we get into a difficult time, students are beginning to feel overwhelmed, sad. It's really sinking in. The honeymoon phase is over with. Got midterms due, I miss you, things are getting difficult, they may become tearful. That's when they call you. So when we talk about that as a parent or guardian is, what has helped them in the past with difficult times, whether it's running or playing piano. That just to acknowledge it, first of all, yes, this is difficult, and I know you can do it, and you're going to get through this. And reminding them of what hasn't changed. We're still here, we love you, you can call us anytime. It's also part of the reason it's important that they do stay on campus those first 6 weeks is because they need to be able to develop another network, a new network. New friends, social activities, environment, so that they become more comfortable with that. So encouraging them to get involved in lots of activities, not too many because that can increase the stress. So just enough that they can connect with people, something that's feeling really comfortable for them. Sleep, we're going to talk about that next. That's really important, making sure that they get adequate rest, and that's 8 hours a night. So we're going to talk a little bit about sleep. We are the leaders, I would say, in the country on college health sleep. We have the Center for College Sleep here. Several of our folks are speaking around the country. They're going to be at UC Davis in a few months. They're working with the NCAA. They've published numerous papers. And it all begins with thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We don't think about that too much because we're all striving to get up to the top part, but you can't get up to the top part unless you pay attention to the building blocks. And part of that is sleep, just as much as breathing and eating is. And with our society, it's very different than it used to be. And when you think about our students, especially the increasing stress, the increasing phone use or electronic information, it becomes problematic. A student a few years ago, it was a faculty member who he seemed to be agitated. He was outside the classroom, he was by the water fountain, and he was trying to do something with his mouth and with his hands and his back. And the faculty member came up to him and said, "What's going on?" And he said, somebody played a joke on me. They put glue in my hands and in my mouth and down my back, and he was really quite upset. And she said, "Well, let's get public safety to take you over to health services. We'll have you check you out." So one of our internists saw him, and she'd actually known him and knew that this was not usual behavior for him at all, and said, "Well, tell me what's been going on. What happened before this happened?" And he'd been up for 2 days straight, took 5 Red Bulls over that 2 days, and after talking with him, she identified that it was sleep deprivation and caffeine toxicity. He was having a psychotic episode because he had been so sleep deprived and he had so much caffeine. Called a parent came and picked him up, and he went home and he slept for 2 days and he was fine. Could have easily been a hospitalization, but what students don't realize that there are adverse side effects to both of those activities. So we try to do a lot of education regarding that, but some of the things we have to talk about with them is what are the challenges to getting good sleep. Time management, and some of that we're working with our faculty as well. And probably happened in high school. If the teacher says, "Okay, your paper's due at midnight," what do? They get their paper in, done, right? Then they start on the next day's work. So that's not going to be conducive to good night's sleep. We look at the facilities. If they're exercising every morning at 7, and then on Sunday morning the activities building doesn't open until noon, that's a problem on our part. So we look at our environment as well. Technology in the bedroom is probably one of the biggest ones, and that's been going on for a few years now. So some of the research that we're doing, and soon to be published, was looking at You know, how are they using their technology? We know that that's a problem, but how are they using it, and what are they using, and how often are they, you know, even picking it up and checking it? So we have some nice information that drills down even farther. So one of the things you might want to talk to your student about is their roommate. How many times can they push that snooze button? And making sure that it's turned all the way off at night, because even that little when a message comes through, we know from the research that's been done here that they don't get into the nice deep REM sleep. And that nice deep REM sleep is when short-term memory is turned into long-term memory. It's when your body produces most of the immunoglobulins that are needed for fighting infection. You know, if you don't do this or you do it over and over again, you can have long-term consequences, maybe contributing to such things as diabetes. Other things that interfere, obviously alcohol, depression and anxiety. Well, does the depression and anxiety come first, or does the sleep deprivation? Academic pressures to get up early. Students are, especially if they're an athlete, a lot of times students are terrified that they're going to oversleep for a practice or a game. Caffeine in the afternoons. We have people taking Red Bull, which is really going to mess up their sleep, and especially if they take a caffeinated beverage in the afternoon. So we talk about trying not to drink after the noon. Noisy environment. We'll talk a little bit about that too, that if your student is rooming with somebody who is always playing music on their device, or it's just always going off, they need to make sure that they can talk to them beforehand about decreasing that. This is some research showing, okay, in high school they went to bed about 10:15. By grade 12 it was 11, and then you go into the first year of college, you know, somewhere between, let's see, the week is 12:30, weekend 2 o'clock. This is on average. This is a huge shift from high school to college. The last time your child had a shift this large is when you took away their afternoon nap. So this is a significant change in their behavior, sleep hygiene, and it does impact their health. This is some of Dr. Pritchard's work. She is a neurobiologist here, and if you look at this, okay, starting on Wednesday, the sleep, they went to bed 00 military time, that's midnight, and then gradually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I think he went to bed that person like at 5 o'clock in the morning. The next day, a really long nap, and then, you know, for the week, then they have a sleep deficit of about 8 hours. You know, and your student will say, oh, I'll just make up for it on the weekend. We now know that only about 40% of your sleep that you've lost can be made up. Eventually, that bank will go empty, and that's when we start to see illnesses and problems. So some of the things we do, and we do a lot, and Bertie Cunningham is the director for the Wellness Center. She and Dr. Pritchard do a lot of education on get more Z's to get more A's, sleep challenges, just lots of information. And a lot of times for the student, it clicks a little bit more because it's not us as a parent saying it, it's science, and they can understand the science a bit more. And also our students are, again, ahead of the nation on this. 62% of students are interested in receiving more information, and 38% have said that they've gotten information, which is the largest of any of the colleges that are in this pool. Well, so this was, again, Dr. Pritchard did this research, which was looking at this very large database of, I think it's 82,000 students, and looking at those that got what we would consider the average amount of sleep, and that may be only 7 hours. I'm not sure what the 0.00 is, but that's the average. So those that got better than average got better grades. Those that did the worst in their sleep got worse grades. That doesn't seem surprising to us, but nobody's ever done that before. Nobody looked at that. What she also correlated is that this has a bigger impact on a student's grades than does alcohol and drugs combined. So sleep is where we're putting a lot of our effort on, and helping students take a look at that. So what do you as a parent or guardian do? Encourage them to wake up the same time every day. That's more important than the time they go to bed at night. It'll help them stay on schedule, but we would like them to get at least 8 hours. And then their environment that they're sleeping in. So if they're moving on campus, the best time to have that conversation with an upcoming roommate is now, before they move in together. Because once you have that discussion, it's not, you know, it's not argumentative. It's just saying, you know, I really like to go to bed at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. What do you think about having the lights out? You know, if you're going to play music, make sure you put your headphones in. I like to have the room dark. You know, I'd rather not have guests after midnight. Just those sort of conversations, or at least asking about it so that they can understand what each other's preferences are. And then to get a minimum of 8 hours. When we asked our students what most impacts their academics, stress is number one, anxiety is second, and sleep difficulties is the third one. And again, you don't know which happens first. Is it the sleep problem or is it the anxiety? So we do spend a lot of energy on that. I was going to mention something else about the sleep difficulties. I don't quite remember, but we do spend a lot of time on that. Some of the questions that we ask our students so that we're giving them information that they want is, are you interested in receiving information on the following? So they're most interested in stress reduction and how to help others in distress, sleep difficulties, nutrition, so you can kind of go down the list there. And then we look at what have you received? And you can see the two that are the largest is sexual assault and violence prevention and alcohol. Those are the two courses that right now are required by law, and so they get these online courses. So they're receiving them, that's good, we mandate that they do. Now we ask them, what impacts your academics, or what do you think impacts their academics? And again, stress and sleep are way up there. And again, so we're focusing on that to try to help them with both of those areas. I went through this pretty quickly. I know I missed some major points that I usually like to share, but making sure that you talk to your student about how their health impacts their success here. There's a nice new video that the group put together for the NCAA a couple months ago. They presented down in Indianapolis on sleep in the athlete. And they interviewed 5 or 6 of the coaches. They interviewed several of the students. And it's a really well done video. If you have a chance to take a look at it, it's on the Center for College Sleep at St. Thomas. And one of the coaches talks about, because they focused a lot on this year, did a lot of training with their athletes, is kind of their magic bullet, and that they had the highest GPA they've ever had, and they've had the best year athletically that they've ever had when they began to focus on this area. So again, continue to talk to your student about their goals, your expectations. You know, part of their goals, I'm sure, is to succeed here, and to do that, they have to stay healthy.